SketchyGOichie.
Hey everybody, welcome to SketchyGOichie. I have a little special treat for you. But first, I want to ask a question. How many of you out there are challenged by drawing heads? Human heads, faces, all of it. Specific features on the face, the nose, the mouth, the placement, the proportion, the whole kit and caboodle. How many of you guys are challenged by that? And if the answer is none and you've got it covered, then then great. Give me the link to your YouTube channel and I will absolutely subscribe because I want to see how you do it. Let's face it, heads are a challenge. Faces are a challenge. And to truly master them, as some artists have, it's cliche, but it takes a tremendous amount of practice, tremendous amount of study. Oftentimes, the sources of which you study from kind of dictates your progress. So if you're a lover of anime and manga and you like to render in that style, and that's all you study and that's all you draw from, and you render from essentially other people's art who have completely mastered that style, great. If you can truly yourself pick up on all the little subtle tricks and the subtleties that go into making those faces appealing in that particular style, good on you if you can do it. Great. But for me, I think it's best, or maybe not best, but advisable to study from real life whenever possible, and then manipulate it, then stylize it. Most people will say that's the best way to go, and I don't always do what most people do, but in this case, when it comes to art, it's tried and true. So on this particular page, what I chose to do is do some fantasy characters. I started off with this female character. There's a strange sort of hat she created out of some imaginary creature, and this pelt that she's wearing over her shoulders. I imagined her to be some sort of native person, and some sort of maybe perhaps a native warrior woman, and she's wearing this weird sort of weird hat. It's got almost like a gremlin look to it. As I look at it now, it looks a little bit like she found Stripe from the Gremlins and skinned him and used him as a hat, and then pieced together bits of a boar or some other creature and cobbled it together to give it her a look. But so my point in mentioning any of that is that this is a completely fictitious character, and although her proportions aren't 100% lifelike, and perhaps not perfectly rendered to be photorealistic, it is, however, I hope, pleasing to look at. And technique notwithstanding, for me, to get a pleasing looking shape, it's all about proportions. It's about where you place the features on the face. It's about how narrow the jaw is. It's about all of that. And if you're not sort of studying that stuff from life, it's very difficult to being able to manipulate it or know where to manipulate it. So as I move on to this next character, I was like, well, I drew a female warrior. I thought I might draw a male one. And then, of course, if we're going to be fantasy, then I thought I'd draw some sort of ogre-like characters, this big, beefy, sort of brutal warrior ogre. And so the point of this is to, again, get into the proportions and the features of the face. And oftentimes that's what determines a successful face rendering, is how you proportion the individual parts in that oval shape that you start with, and then how you apply the proper amount of emphasis, in shadow and a line on all the different disparate parts. So as you can see, I generally start with the eyes and then determine from there where I want to go. Sometimes I'll go down to the nose just to kind of center the face, whereas the nose is literally in the center of the face, and then to the mouth, and then oftentimes out to the ears, and then I'll shape out the head from there. Some people's approach is to kind of do the outer shape, the entire sort of like outer part of the contour of the shape, the top of the head, around both ears, the jawline, and so forth. For me, though, I like to start with the eyes. I like being able to generate the expression I'm looking for almost immediately. And you'll find the more you render, you'll find that happens quite often. Is where you'll see on this new character I'm starting, you'll find that just a furrowing of the brow, or upturn of the lips and nose will create sort of a maybe not a sly look, but certainly a mischievous look. And hopefully you can see in this character, I think he's kind of like this kind of dwarf wizard character that I'm creating. Hopefully you can see he's got kind of it's not whimsical so much if it's kind of, there's a little subtle mischievousness in there, and that's really just in rendering the expression. As in most drawings, at least for me, I'm not alone certainly in this, it's really about grabbing that shape of the overall head, that sort of oval or manipulated oval or circle or blocky shape or whatever you use to get started, and then adding onto it. And when I render these, I should mention this particular one, this drawing or this series of drawings was done in Procreate, my iPad app of choice, and using the Apple Pencil. And so just I go into Procreate, I select a brush that I like to use. I kind of manipulate it to suit my needs, and then I start drawing. And there are, as I've mentioned in previous videos, a million, well, not a million, it's a bit exaggerated, but there are quite a few, how to create your own custom brushes and all the tips and to making them your own are in there. So I finished that character, the I guess dwarf wizard, and then I moved on to this, I don't even know what to call her. She's kind of like a woodland nymph queen, I think is what I was going for with her. And so she's going to have some really unique features as we go along. But the main thing is capturing that face. And in this case, I don't know if you noticed, I sort of kind of roughed up the entire outer shape and then started detailing in her eyes and, and her nose and her mouth. And I don't even think I even put eyeballs in on this character. I wanted to give her, and if I do, they're very subtle. I wanted to give her an otherworldly feel, and that's a nice trick. If you start messing around with the eyeballs, the irises, you'll create a character that doesn't, that may look humanoid but is not truly human, just by playing around with those eyeballs and what you do with them. And again, this is purely an imaginary character. For me, I'll render a loose shape and then kind of create something off of that. I'll start with sort of these little, I don't know if you noticed, these series of little diamond-like shapes, and then I manipulated them into sort of branches and tree leaves and limbs. Also, if you noticed, I render in line. I kind of scratch it out loosely, tighten it up a bit with a denser line, and then I love to use a mid-tone sort of background color overall, and then apply a white on top to kind of bring out the highlights and the eyeballs themselves, maybe some subtle detailing on like what I'm doing here with the branches and her ear and some of the leaves. Just single light source from one direction, usually from above, and adding these little wisps of white, I think kind of kind of give the drawing some energy. That's one of the main things I love to put into these drawings is two main things, I should say. It is energy, given the image life, and also, I'd love to give expression wherever possible, or movement. So I guess that's three things. I like to kind of trick the eye into thinking there's a bit of movement, and that's just in the line work. It's about giving the line some directionality, having lines that sort of taper into a darker place, or feather off into a point. And when they do, that kind of naturally draws your eye towards the point. So this is another sort of weird image. It's kind of this ape character, clearly distorted. I wanted it to look like it was majorly distorted, like it was being shot on camera with a fisheye lens, and so that's why the mouth is so obnoxiously large and drooly in the foreground, and the tongue kind of spilling out, a little bit like the if you're familiar with I think it's Fast and Loud. I think that's the name of the show on television. It's the name of the garage. It's one of these kind of automotive shows, but the name of the garage is Gas Monkey, and they got this really cool logo with this ape character, the monkey character, with his tongue spilling out of the mouth. It's kind of an obnoxious rendering in a good way, and so I guess this is my take on it. But this is more of a fantasy ape, not a realistic chimpanzee. So that's why it's kind of got almost a little bit of a man. It's a weird hybrid. There's a little more manly, maybe probably a little more Planet of the Apes hybrid thing happening here. But he's definitely distorted, and I have in order to get to distortion, it is what I mentioned in the early part of this video. You've got to kind of not master, but as close to get to a point where you're super comfortable rendering realistically. I've spent many years working from photography, swipe images from magazines and newspapers back in the day, and photocopies of images from books in the library, working from those to get kind of the realism down, until the modern era where you could just simply Google image search anything, any single subject matter, and work from those images, whether it be celebrities, whether it be real life folks, or just stock photo images. And you can kind of use those to kind of master your craft of drawing real people and real faces and real head shapes and real animals in this case. This I had zero reference, so I just kind of, if it gets a little extra distorted because it has zero reference, that is why. And there is a point, because I am using Procreate, that I'm able to manipulate this even after I'm done rendering it. So you can see there, actually, I don't know if you noticed that the shape got a little wider, and that's me just kind of taking it and pulling the image wider, because it is on its own layer in Procreate. Not something you can necessarily do in your sketchbook, but you can always open up a new sheet, a new page, and just draw a new one. That is an option, guys. So here's when I start the final character in this set of imaginary characters. It's this warrior or a knight. He's going to be a dark knight, but not Batman. You'll see it later. I'll apply a little more shading in there. And again, I'm just pulling shapes. I'm just literally letting the pencil or pen define where I go next, and just sort of scratching and etching, and it's almost like I'm kind of sculpting in, allowing the thing to take place as I and it's a good little trick you guys can do, particularly in when you're doing sketches like this, where they're either under drawings, or they're just sort of practice drawings, or you're just doing studies, which essentially this is what these pages are, just kind of head studies. Not the intent is not to be finished art. And you can see here is where I'm starting to kind of shade in using kind of directional lines. lines that kind of go along the same path, the same parallel path. When you do that, you can define the directionality of things, as I mentioned earlier. Allowing the lines to go towards the light is a great way to kind of, and keeping them all going in a consistent direction, and only breaking that direction when you want to turn the corner, if you will, is when you start to break the direction and go in different ways. But I think, a lot of young artists have trouble, sort of figuring out how to shade things. And the reality is, if you can kind of bend all your either your blended shapes or your line art towards the light, I think you'll be well on the path to making things really consistent. So putting the finishing touches here. I've got his cloak in, and I'm adding the highlights in, and have a lot of fun lately adding highlights on these sort of black line art on a colored background paper with white highlights. I like that. I like the fact that you get the contrast with the darks, and you get the higher sort of contrast with the lights. So here they are. I chose to put them on an orange background for some reason. I loved how dramatic it changed. They all seem to get a lot more intensity. You notice these little spittle and things like that. I think that's the directionality, and that's the energy I love to add to things. Same thing on her. It's the directionality of the lines. It's the way they flow from there down to the bottom. Even on him, I think the intensity with him is in the expression. It's the, I don't give a, what. With her, she's a bit more static. I think hopefully what makes her interesting is, sort of the costuming and the choices, one makes when they accessorize. For him, it's, again, it's a complete freestyle of his armor and his little ponytail there and that sort of Spartan thing. And lastly, the dwarf wizard here, bald dwarf wizard at that. So there are all the characters all on a page, all for your enjoyment. Hopefully you guys get a kick out of this stuff and you get something out of it. And if you do, please feel free to leave a comment below and subscribe. So, SketchyGOichie, live your moment. Happy sketching, y'all. Peace.